I knew the hand of God was on me in the crack house. I knew. I looked back and I'm like, yeah, they were gonna take me out. They were gonna rob. I should have been dead. I knew I was supposed to have been dead. But even in our foolishness and in our mess, God's what? His grace and his mercy, right? Grace and mercy. With grace, he gave me what I didn't deserve. That's grace. Mercy, he didn't give me what I did deserve. And so it's because of God's grace and God's grace and mercy that I'm here. And trust me, it is still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress. I haven't arrived by no means. And the moment that, constantly fighting, I want to give up and there's other mountains to climb and I get so frustrated. But I also understand, as I was just sharing with class and sharing with the guys at the home, in order to get to every mountaintop, you have to what? You have to go through a valley. You can't get to a mountaintop without going through a valley, right? You got to go through a valley. You got to go through a valley. And when you go through it, right, your prayer is that you will grow through what you are going through. Grow through what you are going through. So I don't know in terms of where you are or in terms of, we talk about addiction and talk about, whether it's you just hear, and you want to learn some more about it, or perhaps there's, you want to start recovery ministry at your home, or you have somebody who's going through it. And again, I'll stop early and have some questions that if you want to ask me in terms of just things that I've been had an opportunity to experience at. But anyway, so we look at addiction and we look at idol worship as a worship disorder. So we go back in terms of, and by the way, one of the books that I use with, we talk about recovery ministry, but one of the books that I really like, one is a book where I took the title from, by Mike Wilkerson. It's actually called Redemption, Freed by Jesus from the Idols We Worship and the Wounds We Carry. So I kind of changed this workshop a little bit, but this is a good book in terms of, because I like it in terms of it covers not only addiction, but it talks about helping people with addictions in the church. And the reason why that I say that, because you probably heard, how many have heard of like stories where I knew, listen, I get emotional talking about this. I knew the hand of God was on me in the crack house. I knew. I looked back and I'm like, yeah, they were gonna take me out. They were gonna rob. I should have been dead. I knew I was supposed to have been dead. But even in our foolishness and in our mess, God's what? His grace and his mercy, right? Grace and mercy. With grace, he gave me what I didn't deserve. That's grace. Mercy, he didn't give me what I did deserve. And so it's because of God's grace and God's grace and mercy that I'm here. And trust me, it is still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress. I haven't arrived by no means. And the moment that, constantly fighting, I want to give up and there's other mountains to climb and I get so frustrated. But I also understand, as I was just sharing with class and sharing with the guys at the home, in order to get to every mountaintop, you have to what? You have to go through a valley. You can't get to a mountaintop without going through a valley, right? You got to go through a valley. You got to go through a valley. And when you go through it, right, your prayer is that you will grow through what you are going through. Grow through what you are going through. So I don't know in terms of where you are, or in terms of, we talk about addiction, and talk about, whether it's you just hear, you want to learn some more about it, or perhaps there's, you want to start recovery ministry at your home, or you have somebody who's going through it. And then again, I'll stop early and have some questions that if you want to ask me in terms of just things that I've been had an opportunity to experience at. But anyway, so we look at addiction and we look at idol worship as a worship disorder, So we go back in terms of, and by the way, one of the books that I use with, we're talking about recovery ministry, but one of the books that I really like, is a book where I took the title from, by Mike Wilkerson. It's actually called Redemption, Freed by Jesus from the Idols We Worship and the Wounds We Carry. So I kind of changed this workshop a little bit, but this is a good book in terms of, because I like it in terms of it covers not only addiction, but it talks about helping people with addictions in the church. And the reason why that I say that, because you probably heard, how many have heard of like AA, right? AA, NA, and those, NA is Narcotics Anonymous, AA is Alcoholics Anonymous. There's also the two groups that I really like. This actually, you can go through some training and have some recovery groups in your church that they have started. It's very, very intense, and they're biblically based. There's another ministry that I was involved in for years and still involved in. You may be familiar with, anybody familiar with Celebrate Recovery? Celebrate Recovery started out of Saddleback Church, California, and Pastor John Baker and Rick Warren, of course, is the senior pastor. So Celebrate Recovery is also a ministry, and it's probably now about 25,000 churches. And so their groups that they have weekly are the format, kind of like AA, but it's biblically based. They got 8 principles, very good. But the reason why I like that is because they have groups for a lot of things: eating disorders, alcoholism, drug abuse, people that's going through divorce, so they deal with a lot of issues that, a lot of things that people are going through. So those are a couple of groups that you may, want to look into if that's the direction you're going. So, but anyway, idol worship, as we mentioned, every single time that the children of Israel strayed away from God, there was always an idol involved, right? There's an idol involved, and they strayed from their Creator. They strayed from the God who led them, across. As a matter of fact, soon as they got through the Red Sea and got on dry land, what was one of the things they started doing? Complaining, right? Complaining. Forgot about the God who brought them out of bondage, who brought them, and they started complaining. And so, God dealt with them. And so, idol worship, and addiction is, as I mentioned, is a worship disorder. So we begin to give the idols, and we begin to give them the same worth and the same commitment that God requires of him, right? And so, as a result, God says, my glory, I would not give to another. So as you begin to pay attention to that idol, your life will change. And now let me break it down and let me explain it to you the way that I do my classes. And addiction. So, how many of you have kids? Right? How many of you have grown kids? Okay. So now, when you had a little child, right? You basically took, your little boy, or whatever, and you basically told him what to do, right? Right? You told him to sit down, and you were the big person, right? So you were in charge. Now, put on a different hat. Now, how many of you have grown kids? All right? Now, the reality of it is, and let's go back. So you could actually discipline the child because what? You were the bigger person, right? This is like Pastor Sean was saying last night, let his son know, I'm bigger than you, right? You're going to be safe, but I'm the big one. Now, the reality of it is, though, even with him, if you really physically wanted to make your son do something, could you? Physically. Right. See, some of us have to be.
As a little boy?
No, right now.
Oh, no.
Of course not. Why? You're the dad, though.
Yeah.
But he's probably bigger and stronger than you.
Right.
Guess what, guys? That's how addiction starts. See, our addiction starts just like that. And we think we get away with it. Because you can what? You can control your child. So your addiction is here, and this is how I tell we walk around and we tell other people, who is that? Oh, this is my addiction. Oh, but it's okay because I can control them. I look at little pornography. I tell them to go sit down. I use a little drugs. Go sit down. I don't want no more. Right? What we fail to realize is that we're doing what to him? We're feeding him. So one day, now we get comfortable because we have an addiction, but guess what? We can control our addiction because it is smaller than us. We can tell it to go sit down. If I just want to do some things on the weekend where nobody at church knows, then guess what? I can tell, come on, we're going to go. Then one day, as our using, we don't realize that our addiction now is what? Bigger than us. So we're looking down at addiction, and then one day, our addiction comes. Get up. I want to go get one. I'm tired. I'm sleeping. No, you better get up. Then your addiction, what? Now has control of you. Y'all getting this? So now all of a sudden, you don't understand. I used to have control. I used to tell my addiction what to do, but now my addiction is telling me what to do. So now all of a sudden, when I think that I had my pornography at a certain time, and then all of a sudden, and see, that's what I did. I scheduled and said, well, look, I'm only going to go get high on, Fridays and Saturdays, because guess what? I got this. Nobody needs to know. Plus, I just asked forgiveness and went all that other stuff and just, And so we believe that we have control. We believe that we have control. And then next thing we know, our addiction that we have fed, all of the mess has grown bigger and bigger. And as a result, the person that's in bondage is us, and the person that's in control is our addiction. And so, what happens? What needs to happen? Well, the painful thing is that it's a process. As I teach, it's a process, and tell clients whether they're in church or whether they're in a treatment center, it's a process. You didn't become an addict overnight, and so it's going to be a process. And the reason why I stress that is because that was my issue with God. Look, you're God. Just do the Moses wave the magic wand over the river thing and just take all of this away from me. You know, I ain't got to go through that. Just do your God thing. You know, why? Come on. I got some work to do. You want me to do the work, whatever. Let all this stuff. You know. And so I says, no, it's a process, and it's all designed to get you closer to me. It's all designed, and like, well, can we get closer a different way? Just take all this away. Also understand that I've learned that it's not about my story, right? It's God's story. It's not my story with God in it. It's God's story with me in it. You get that? It's not my story with God in it. It's God's story with me in it. And so I'm a living testimony to what God has done in terms of so many things. But I wish I had time to tell you in terms of, again, how did it start? You know, how did the drugs and stuff start? And it started with again, you know, looking at somebody talked about lust and getting involved in adultery, and getting involved in all the things that you think that I can handle this. I can handle this. That's number one. And then the other thing is nobody needs to know. And that's what part of my frustration with the church is. We have people in the church with stories of deliverance. People have stories of where God has brought them. And guess what? There's young people in the church that don't know those stories. They don't know those stories. So they feel as though nobody's here been through what I went through. And then all of a sudden you got Sister So-and-so who used to be, who years ago nobody knew that she was delivered and was a prostitute. And there was Brother So-and-so used to be an alcoholic. And this person was delivered. And no one knows because those stories aren't being told. And so that there's people in the church that think I've got a standard, I've got an image, because guess what? Nobody else is going through all of this stuff. And so those stories aren't being told. Because guess what? Your obedience is connected to somebody's destiny. Your obedience in terms of what God has brought you through is connected. I remember when I first started, when you go to NA and AA, they of course encourage you to get what's called a sponsor, right? A sponsor is somebody to help you walk through the process, take you through and at time wish I had time to talk to you about the 12 steps. And so I went, and for a minute, you know, I struggled in NA because instead of just sitting down and listening and what was being told there, I wanted to always bring out my preacher bag, thinking that, I need to go here and these people talking about God, but let me talk about, what they're missing. And, sometimes God will have us learn from, He will have us learn from somebody who we think is not qualified. Everybody get that? God will have us learn from people who we think are not qualified. Look at again the history of children of Israel. How did he teach them? Sometimes he taught them from people who were godless, right? Didn't know him, but it's just like, this is a lesson that you need to learn. So anyway, I remember even going to NA, I said, I ain't gonna find nobody that up in here that's went through what I went through. And I remember back in Chicago, there's a suburb called Harvey, Illinois, and they have a NA recovery place called Harvey 100 Club. And I remember sitting there back in the 80s, and I remember because at that time I had been, preacher, pastor. I'm like, ain't nobody up here been through what I went through. I remember sitting there, and the young man was given what we call give a lead, or given a talk, and he was an assistant pastor of a church and had some years clean. And I sit right there, and the Holy Spirit said, "That's your sponsor." Why? Because what he had been through as assistant pastor, that's the story. That's what I mean by there's somebody now waiting that's going through some things right now that's waiting perhaps to whatever story you have to go, whatever you went through. Now again, whatever you have gone, whatever as men we're going through, it don't have to be drugs and alcohol. You know, maybe in terms of self-esteem and some things that you struggle with, that other young people need to hear. They need to hear your story. I was talking to somebody last night, and powerful Christian, powerful friend of mine, but talk about, you know, it's just, you know, Tim, man, this is, you know, it's been some struggle, some things he was talking about in terms of his marriage, and this is the first time he's ever talked with me openly like that, and I encouraged him strongly, but he was saying, ain't nobody on there that I could talk to. That's what excites me. See, that's, you know, you got to get a cabinet, and whatever you're going through, and I'll end in like with this. Listen, the president, well, maybe not our current president, but anyway, the president has a cabinet, right?
Right.
Now, what's really the most important cabinet or council that he has? Any president. Advisor, and it's called else what? What else? What's the name that's called? No, it was actually one that's more important than that.
Secretary of State.
No, the cabinet.
Oh, the cabinet.
Okay, actually, it's the council. Security Council, right? The security, what's it called? Security Council. Really, that's the most important. Right. Those are the people that he calls, remember, to make any major decisions, right? They want to invade somewhere, there's that security cabinet or council. When they invaded, or when they caught, Bin Laden, right? And there were certainly certain people that were there and they watched it. Now, what type of people do you think should be on that cabinet that he chooses? Because remember, those are some tough decisions that he has to make, any president. So what type of people do you choose to be on that cabinet? Okay, but what type of people?
I would say godly people.
Well, as a president, we not don't give me biblical answers. Just also. Well, now actually, let's look at the political realm, right? What type of people do you think I got to make some decisions that's going to affect the rest of the world? So, what type of people do I choose on that cabinet that gives me advice that makes, you know? In other words, let me help you. I've got to make some decisions. Let's say, for example, whether we go in and get Bin Laden or invade. So these are the people that I'm going to choose to help me make those decisions. What type of people do I choose?
Military.
Gone through something? What else? Okay, let me help you. Should they be people, they're your friends? Yes, people?
People with different opinions.
Then, say it again.
People with different opinions.
Not only different opinion, but people that even though you chose and it's close, that's not afraid to what? Tell you the truth. Yes. Yeah, you my boy, but guess what? That's a bad decision. If you want to choose all yes people, then guess what? You're not going to make good decisions. On his cabinet, you got to make people that will challenge you and say, no, this is a bad idea. Don't do this. In our lives, what kind of people you have on your cabinet? Do you have people that you can go to and say, this is what I'm getting ready to do, and they'll tell you, are you out of your mind? But you're supposed to be my boy. Yes, I'm your boy. That's why I'm telling you that's a bad decision.
That sounds like a wife.
Right. And guess what? Your wife got to be on your cabinet. I've got some people that's on my cabinet. My sister, I call her the Secretary of Defense. She's been on my cabinet for years. And she don't mince no words. If I make a wrong decision, she would tell me hardcore and core, are you out of your mind? What people do you have on your, you gotta have people on your cabinet when you talk about dealing with idol worship that will tell you, you are venturing into dangerous territory. But you also got to have people on your cabinet that you can call up and say anything and they won't be shocked. See, if you got to have somebody that you can call and say, man, you know, let's just be real, right? I was tempted today, so and so. I'm married, but I was tempted, and you got to have somebody on the cabinet that say, "Oh my God, no, you know, let's stop calling and praying right now. Oh my God, no, they're not the type of people. You gotta have people that's calm and say, okay, what do we need to do?" Pastor Sally has been on my cabinet for years. Years. And he's been through everything pretty much I've been through. But one thing that I love about him, I was telling about somebody the other day, I was in Boston, and when I would relapse and call him up, one of the things he simply would say, okay, real simple, you messed up, now clean it up. Because he knew that you got to go through some things. Just you messed up, like clean it up. See, them the type of people that, of course he got. I mean, there's no, I'm not talking about condoning and whatever, but it's like, let's do. But people that won't trip out because you messed up and you did something, or even in your thinking, you gotta have some people on your cabinet. Some of you all also got some people on your cabinet that you need to probably give some pink slips to. All right? You got some people like, you know what? This person don't need to be on my cabinet. Because sometimes we do some things because we want to fit in. You at work, but actually at some point, there's one person that come around and gives all the little dirty jokes. Here's an example, right? They say the dirty jokes and they include you in. And instead of you telling them that you offended to that, you want to be what? I still want to be in. I want to be there. I don't want to tell them, right? And so that you give them an impression that it's okay to say those things, type of things around you. And if that person is close, that's probably somebody that don't need to be on your cabinet. So it's a process in terms of dealing with this whole idol worship thing. In our next session, we're going to talk about helping hurting men. But let me give you a few minutes to ask any questions about the ministry, or because we're basically out of time. Not only about the ministry or pretty much idol worship. So let's kind of open it up.
So if you have a friend and they're caught in some kind of addiction, or they're trying to get their cabinet together, do you need to be invited to be on their cabinet, or because you're their friend, you volunteer?
I would say that the best way is to make yourself available to be invited. Okay. Now, how do you do that? Well, the people that's on my cabinet displayed some trust. And again, it was like this. There's some people, well, let me say it this way. The one thing that I do best, that I know that I do number one best, I don't need any help at all from anybody beating myself up. I don't need no help. I do a really, 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 really good job at that. I don't need no help with that, right? So if you are going to just beat me up and tell me about what I've done, I'm like, I got that. I do really a pretty good job at that. And so I need cabinet members that's going to encourage me. Don't condone what I'm doing, but just like, look, because they know I'm going to feel that I'm going to suffer the consequences. So if you make yourself available, how do you make yourself available? By being what? Show yourself friendly. Show yourself, look, it's okay. And then a person, then what? You begin to develop that trust, right? Because especially in the church, people want to know, can I trust you and tell you some things without it all being in the bulletin by next Sunday? Right? And so I think that if that answers that's kind of a...
And then a follow-up, if you are the person that happens just to tell them the truth, but then they are open to that, they get offended and then they cut you off. Does that mean that they're just not ready?
They're not ready. And then the other thing, at some point, if you stay connected and I'll just say, well, I'm here if you need me.
Okay.
Right? At some point, they will come back. Because when they begin to struggle with the truth, what do we do with the truth? We First of all, we rethink the truth, we reject the truth, and then we replace the truth. Right? Because the truth was what? A person. Right? And that person is Jesus Christ. The truth is a person. And so what happens is we begin to reject those things. And I tell my clients, I said, you can't get high off the truth anymore. It's like, Mr. Cross, what do you mean? Well, once I know the truth, I can't just go and do some stuff. And once you know the truth, even when you're dealing with